reflective of the comments that we're providing at the 3 meetings that we've attended for Gasset, and it's also reflective of your meeting in March or April when we sent the comments in for after project solicitation. So we've used that as the text for it. Okay. Yep, that's it on the process.
You know, Glenn, I hear what you're saying about DOT, and I agree. And I hear what you're saying, Tom, but I think you have to make a connection somewhere between the lack of willingness to provide the funds that the state needs to maintain the system properly to the gas hearing. I think you have to somehow. Maybe this isn't tweaked quite right, but there is when I go to the gas hearings, I feel like I'm not talking to the right people. It's not the counselor, it's not the DOT that needs to hear what we're really saying in those gas hearings. It's the legislature. And their unwillingness to consider how to solve this growing and critical issue is the problem. And so when I've gone to the gas hearings, yeah, I most definitely talk about the issue is funding. And getting the appropriate level of funding to maintain our entire transportation program, which is not just the highway side. It's all of the programs we're investing in. We're not the Department of Public Works or Department of Highways anymore, we're the Department of Transportation. So I would ask that we still try and include something related to funding in the discussion of this level.
I just want to make one more comment. It's kind of like a double-edged sword here because the legislators need to really be educated on this.
Right.
And when our citizens, the people that use the transit systems out here, sent them up to Concord, they very clearly told them that they didn't want to pay taxes, unlike this, like the motor vehicle surcharge. What we hear is that it was very clear that that surcharge had to go away because people didn't want to pay for that. So that money went into fixing roads and preservation of our system. Clearly, they didn't want to pay for that. So they took the money away, which then, we lost $30 million. Again, now we got you figure out how to make that gap up, and that's where some of these decisions had to be made to take TE and CMAQ. So I guess it's a big part of this education on people that they don't want to pay for these certain features to help maintain the system, and therefore we got caught with the big surcharge going away, and then we had to make up the loss somewhere. It's kind of a part of that.
Mark?
And I think just with these comments and letters in general that is a big goal of ours, is the education piece. We didn't have to write a page about CMAQ or about TE, but I think that getting into it and describing that, TE maybe it is for sidewalks, maybe it is for biking, and especially at the federal level, there's been some resistance about paying for those types of programs for a transportation system. But the other side that people need to understand is that, look at Newmarket. Those projects that they did in Newmarket for their downtown to get some new sidewalks in there, look at how much investment that spurred in the community. That's creating jobs. That's helping the economy. That's solving a lot of the other goals. But if people don't make these connections and they don't understand the idea in a systemic way, rather than just, this is my fee and I don't want to pay I don't want to pay taxes, then we're not doing a good job at communicating. And I think that is one of those goals, and that's one of the things that we hope from this meeting is that communities or committee members will go back to their communities and say, hey, we had a transportation enhancement project. We need to write a letter about these Gasset hearings saying we still want funding for this because in our community it created 50 jobs. And I think that's one of the goals of this. And I think that people are absolutely right. Gasset doesn't have any control. They don't vote on, reestablishing some kind of user fee for the state to provide hard match for our federal funding. But it is important that the message gets out there so that people can start talking and sharing this information and having a deeper understanding of what's going on.
Yes, Mark. Steve?
I
just to follow up on the DOT comments, that's an interpretive decision. We were jumping to this conclusion that people have said they don't want to pay for X, Y, or Z. Nobody ever asked the people explicitly about the auto registration fee. You're making interpretive decisions, and we all fall into that trap. I agree, there's a sense that we want to pay less, but it's really incorrect to say that people decided they wanted to have their auto fee reduced by 30. That was never explicitly. So I think people want better infrastructure, is what they want. How do we raise the revenue to do it? What are we choosing to build? And those are legitimate questions. I think this letter really needs to be copied to our executive counselors directly, and I would suggest that our legislators be brought into this dialogue. That, as we've said, they really need to understand this dialogue. And so I would suggest that we do CC our state senators and House reps on this. And they may choose to read it or not, but I think it's important that they be brought into this dialogue.
Ken?
Just a couple of clarifying questions, I guess. This letter is dated October 21st. Has this letter been sent out?
No.
Oh, so, Tom, I was understanding that part of your concern was sort of putting a cart before the horse, that this letter had already been sent out before we had a chance to talk about it?
We're saying the same thing at the Gasset hearings as the SRPC position, based on what the policy committee has directed us. So
Yeah,
if there's been a change in the DES status and their views over the summer, then we will reflect that.
So I guess, were you, from the process piece, were you thinking this letter had already been sent?
No, I knew it wasn't sent. It went out on an email last night.
Oh, okay.
And I was unable to open it because my computer doesn't have DocX. It's a DocX format. So first time I saw it was today.
Okay. So I guess from a process standpoint, I like the fact that we're talking about it. It's good stuff. The other question, Tom, that I had for you is the sentence that you referred to says, the Strafford Metropolitan Planning Organization recommends New Hampshire create a designated state revenue stream to provide transportation dollars to fill this gap. It doesn't say that DES do it. It doesn't say DOT does it. It doesn't say that Governor and Council does it. It says New Hampshire.
Ken, where are you at?
This is on page.
Oh, got it, okay.
The sentence right before it starts safety, which is like the third from the end page.
Got it.
So I guess, Tom, are you? I thought one of your concerns was that the message might be directed to the wrong party, but I guess it would seem to me, I think we all agree that New Hampshire does need to create. Or do you disagree with that? Or
No,
does CDS disagree with that?
I see that. It's just, with a letter being addressed to the gas, presumably.
Correct, but it is an observation that the state, and to the extent that Gasset is a part of, or is an organ, if you will, of Governor and Council and reports to the full legislature, at least I personally think that statement is an appropriate statement that identifies the fact that if we're going to do something. And then my last comment, regarding the wishes of the people. I mean, clearly, the issue of the surtax was a political issue upon which representatives ran, and to the extent that one would argue that the representatives represent the people, then I think it's an accurate statement to say that the people did not want. But I don't know that all political planks or all political positions necessarily represent all of the voters. And so clearly the legislature, to the extent that it represents us, made that decision. But I would agree, Steve, with your position. I think if people in the state, voters and those who didn't vote, understood what the connections were between that action and the impacts on infrastructure, that if the question had been asked that way, then you could argue that people in the state didn't support that. So I guess I'm excited about the discussion that's occurring here, and I think there's some really good issues here, because what we're trying to do, I mean, what I'm reading here is we're trying to say, these are tough times and you need to make tough decisions, but to the extent that you want good projects to perk to the top, and you want your biggest bang for the buck, that we need to be really thoughtful about taking money away from those programs that do allow the best projects to perk to the top.
Thank you, Ken. Any further comment on or discussion?
I just
Mark.
have one small comment. One of the reasons we brought this to the policy this month is we will not have a policy meeting before the comments are due. So we were trying to get a feel for policy support. Things can change within the letter before they're sent out, absolutely. And again, it is before that final GASIT hearing, but November 10th is when the comments are due, and we will not have a chance to have a policy meeting before then, which is one of the reasons we brought it to this meeting.
And the letter, I'm sorry, I vetted this and I forgot. This should be going to the GASIT, to the chair of GASIT. So it would be going to Councilor Burton to all the other members of the Executive Council and the Governor and the Commissioner of DOT. And then we would CC DOT staff and the Bureau of Planning Office because they've run the entire process, and the legislators, and of course the Policy and TAP Committee. So we can send this out again, and we'll try to remember to put it in a format that everyone can open or send it as a PDF, whatever works best for people. But we really are very appreciative of the comments that we're receiving from you. It's very valuable.
Just one final thought.
Steve?
Context and scale. I think what gets lost in this discussion is the scale of these investments. For example, like what percentage of money are we talking about in the TE program or the CMAC program compared to the STP program? I mean, what does a bike trail cost in terms of cost benefit compared to a mile of turnpike on Spalding? So if there could be some piece in the letter that contextualized it for the reader, i.e. These programs in this state with this much money, which is X percent of, because the whole dialogue nationally about the TE program, we're spending an inordinate amount of discussion time on it for projects that are immensely popular locally and represent about, I think the number is 1% of the overall transportation funding. So we're having this immense obsession of discussion on 1%, and we're like, the 99%, oh yeah. So it's like, I-93 costs X tens of millions of dollars, and we don't get critically engaged in the pieces of that at all, and whether they're worthwhile, but we will become inordinately obsessed with a $100,000 bike trail that a community has worked 10 years and generated local revenue to pay. So I think if we could get that context into the letter somehow, it would be really helpful to the discussion.
I'm sorry, Lou, I missed this before. There is one other program that's affected, and it's the FTA 5310 program. And I know, Mark, you and Cynthia are aware of that, but it's funds that are transferred from STP to help with elderly and adult public transit programs. And we use those funds in this region currently to serve folks that otherwise don't really have many options. So it is a new use of these funds, and we hope that it doesn't last 2 years ago when trying to build a program around it.
Any further discussion? Ed?
It certainly does revolve around communication again, because most of the public doesn't even know what GASIT is. And I believe I sent in a videotape of one of the commissioners of Carroll County that had a report of what the GASIT meeting was. Now, I didn't send it to everybody, but I can. It's a perfect example of what you do here and how it filters down to the general public. And this is a commissioner, so it's not the public, it's one step above.
A county commissioner.
A county commissioner. They don't know what GASIT is. They can't explain it. They don't know what it means. They don't understand. And I really believe if you focused on telling people that bridge is not going to get fixed if we don't find matching funds to get our federal dollars back, or if you tell your congressman up at the federal level to make sure that they change the rule where we should not have to beg for our federal tax dollars back. Nobody's talking about that. And maybe we have them. It's still a communication issue. People don't understand. And then sending letters back and forth and CCing this person, CCing that person. I don't see how that's going to work. to get to the congressman, the legislature, and everything else. Because everybody would agree that bridges have to be